You love history, science fiction, and role-playing. What if there was a podcast that brought all these things you love together in a deep, dramatic experience you'll never forget? Enter the Twilight Histories, a campaign-style storytelling podcast that casts you as the hero. With the Twilight Histories, you will travel to exotic worlds spread across the multiverse. Some are familiar, others are totally exotic. You'll visit Egypt, locked in an ice age. You'll follow the Mongols across the American plains. You'll explore a terraformed Venus. Pick your adventure and experience a world out of time. The Twilight Histories was awarded one of Apple's Best of the Year and has been nominated for numerous awards in speculative fiction. Now, step on the platform and let's get you on your way. Let the Twilight Histories podcast carry you to a different world.
Pixel Therapy is a member of the But Why Though Podcast Network.
Go to butwhythoughpodcast.com for an inclusive geek community offering pop culture news, reviews, and podcasts.
It's why I often get weirded out by saying the word activism, because I don't feel like I'm really trying to change like policies or government or this or that. So much of what I'm trying to do is really just, if I help one person, if one person sees this and goes, hey, I see that, and maybe that's me, that's job done for me.
Welcome to Pixel Therapy, the video game podcast where we look at the games we play through the lens of the player, where what you play is just as important as how you play it, and where emotional intelligence is a critical stat. Every other week, we bring on a guest who may or may not consider themselves a gamer to discuss the games that have made them and changed them, and all the feelings they have about our favorite pastime. I'm your co-host, Jamie, pronouns she, her.
And I'm your co-host, Spencer, pronouns they, them.
And this is Pixel Therapy. Let's kick things off, as we always do, with our Patreon shout-outs. This is our special thank you to everyone who subscribed at our Patreon name in the credits tier for the month of March. Today, we'd like to say a very big thank you to Val, Genevieve, Lindsay, Grace, Jackie, Ben, Pimitai, and Adiyinka. Thank you all for your generous support. We can't do this without you. Remember, if you want to get your name in the credits, you can hop on over to patreon.com/pixeltherapypod, and you'll get access to our monthly bonus series, Co-op Mode. In our April episode, we talked about TV, talked about some TV shows. We talked about Elden Ring too, but we also talked about Severance, which is a show that everyone needs to go watch right now, yesterday. Get on it. If you're a fan of what we do here on Pixel Therapy, please consider sharing us with your friends and family, rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, or you can even write into the show. Send us a little old email at pixeltherapypod@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. All right, it's time to get cozy. Pull up an armchair. Feel free to lie down on the couch. Bring your shoulders back.
Oh my gosh. Thank you.
That's
for that.
a huge one. Yeah, right?
Let them drop,
oh my
people.
God. Oh, let the shoulders drop. Let the shoulders hit the floor.
That's right.
Instead of the bodies. Let's talk about our feelings, Spencer. How are you?
I'm well, Jamie. I did something very small towny last night.
Small towny. Okay. What was it?
So we had some neighbors move in down the street, and we heard through the town gossip grapevine that it was another gay couple.
Ooh.
Because they were staying at the house of our across the street neighbor's father, because the plumbing in the house that they are moving into exploded. So through all of that roundabout connection, our across the street neighbor was like, oh, by the way, I heard these two guys moved to town. They seem chill. So like any self-respecting queer desperate for community, I hand wrote a letter and folded it up and walked my dog down the street and put it in their mailbox.
Aww.
And I said, we'd love to have you over for dinner to welcome you to the town. And they very enthusiastically sent me a text saying that the letter made their day and that they would absolutely love to come over. And so I made a very elaborate dinner last night, and they came over and we hung out, and it was all very.
Are you doing a podcast with them now?
I felt just so adult, being like, we're having a dinner party, and we had, the main event, and we also picked up some cookies and baked goods from a local bakery, and I don't know, it was really nice. I realized that it had been this may have been the first time since the pandemic, since pre-pandemic days, that I've just like invited us two strangers over to my house and sort of hosted them like that, and it just felt really good. I hope that we can hang out again. It sounds like they're also sort of doing some small scale farming and various DIY projects. So, I said, we're happy to come help. I don't know. It felt good to make a connection in that way. And in the age of social media, it's not often you meet people through handwritten notes. So that was cool too. And word of mouth. So
I'm really just impressed with just the go get 'emness of that entire thing. Like just the active role you're taking in finding like a friend group is really, to be commended, I think, at least for someone like me who has literally like only made friends with people who choose to socially badger their way into my life.
Me, I'm raising my hand.
Yeah, no, and it's not because I don't want to be friends with people. It's because I assume people don't want to be friends with me. And so to the extent that someone even being like, hey, I'd like to be friends with you, I'm like, you're just saying that. I'm going to still leave you alone because you're going to get over this like little mental situation you're having right now. And you're going to realize you don't want to be friends with me.
That I'm boring as hell. Yeah. No, trust me. I very much have these social anxiety what's it called? Hangovers. Like, I feel like, I can be very on and gracious, and people tell me I ask thoughtful questions and that I'm a good host and conversationalist.
You do.
And I find that like in the moment, it feels good. And then the next day, like, so this was last night. And so today, it's like, I'm tired. I'm going over things I said in my head, wondering if I was being annoying or being too much. I'm wondering like, did they have fun? I'm spiraling. Like, it's like I need to just lay down and drink fluids and eat carbs and not talk to anyone for like 24 hours and I'll be okay again. But it's definitely takes something out of me. I don't know. I'm sort of struck these days realizing I'm much more of an introvert than I thought. I love people. I just, I need that me time, that recharge time too.
Yep.
But, luckily,
I just preempt all of that and that post social activity anxiety by keeping everyone at a very long arm's length.
Yeah, exactly. I need the buffers.
Like, I'm sure I will do nothing but disappoint them and embarrass myself, and so I will just.
That's absolutely untrue. You're like one of the only people in my life who has like consistently and actually meant it when they said, I will help you move. And then you've actually shown up to help me move. So like,
even if it was like several hours late, even if it was several hours late because we had to take the dog to the park.
Okay. But you brought food. So that was like,
we did. Yeah.
That you redeemed yourself.
Trying to make up for it. I just felt like such a lump though when we did show up and you and the couple other people that were helping were literally pulling the last things out of the van and Colt and I were like, so can we like go get food or something for everybody that did actual work today? Yeah.
And you did. You nourished us. Thank you for that.
Yeah. You're welcome.
So I'll say luckily, I did have several hours to myself this morning to play a little game and do some recharging of the batteries.
Is that what this game does?
Well, it actually turned out to drain them.
So we're playing NORCO. Or we played NORCO. We're going to be talking about NORCO today. I think we're both still playing Elden Ring, right? I'm certainly still playing Elden Ring. Would you say you're playing Elden Ring?
I would say it's still
Dabbling.
downloaded, and I haven't played it in about a week.
Ouch. It's still downloaded. It's still downloaded. The death knell of any game. If the response is, well, it's still downloaded.
It's just I don't know. I have a complicated relationship with it. I want to love it, and I think I don't know. It's like the line between games are supposed to be fun. This is me. I'm just talking for me. I'm not saying anything about anyone else's feelings about Elden Ring. It's like, on the one hand, games are supposed to be fun.
Fair to be offended.
On the other hand, I'm like, I also want to be like, there are some games, like experiences that I want to be open to, even if it doesn't initially feel fun or easy. Like, it's still important for me to go through it, and I still gain something from it. And so like, I try to be open in that way as well. I think games can give a lot. And I think when we start to allow them to exist outside of just needing to be fun, just needing to be diversions, that's when we allow ourselves to be open to change us. So all of that. And I'm just like, it's so hard and scary. So
yeah,
I don't know. I think it's going to be slow going. There are some games that I start and stop for months, and then the inspiration just hits right, and then all of a sudden I'm hooked. Like that happened with Persona 5, and after I started playing it, I couldn't believe that it had taken me so long to get into it. So I'm not gonna take it off my PS5 anytime soon. And I'm gonna I think too, a side effect of making a podcast is that I think my approach to games has shifted a bit, where I feel this pressure to always be having something to talk about, maybe, and can sort of create this need to move on to the next thing, or to, if there's nothing more to say, then why do I keep playing it? And I'm trying to remind myself that, like, as a hobby as well, it's not just about what do I have to say about it. It's also fine to just experience it. So
I mean,
I think it'll be an ongoing thing.
I'm experiencing that with Elden Ring, just in the sense that, like, I'm totally on the opposite side of the Elden Ring I don't know, wheel, board, world, whatever. I'm totally on the opposite side, where I'm just like, I'm all in, and it's kind of all I want to play. But I don't want to just talk about Elden Ring on the podcast, because also, weirdly, Elden Ring is a bit of a brain off game. It's like, it's not a game that, I don't know. I'm discussing it with my partner as we're playing it, and that's kind of like, that's the connection that I'm getting out of it. And it's, just good for me to unwind with, weirdly, which sounds so bizarre, because it's definitely not a like chill, relaxing, like chill vibes kind of game. But it's not something that I feel like I would, even if there's nothing to unpack every other week in a podcast episode, or for me, it's just like, yeah, I'm still doing this, and I'm still enjoying it, and it's still hitting the same things that it was hitting the first time I talked about it.
There's a lot to unpack with the hand spiders.
Yeah, so much. Like, why did they move that way? And why can't I dodge roll in time? But yeah,
why
so, like,
do they have that many fingers?
It's too many. It's definitely too many. It's not even two hands put together. It's like there's like a half of a third in there, and they like do this like crawl shift anyway.
And they infect your dreams.
I don't need to talk about the hand spiders every other week, right? So I'm like, okay, well, that's no problem. Like, I can totally just play smaller games, in between. And then it was just like pulling myself to play NORCO this week was like pulling teeth. I was just like, all I wanted to do was go play Elden Ring and unwind with Elden Ring. But I did pull myself away, and I did play NORCO.
Proud of you.
And NORCO very quickly, like, totally grabbed me. Holy cow. So we're going to talk about NORCO today, which is a fantastic, right? Can we say it's fantastic? Would you say it's fantastic? I think fantastic.
That's one word.
Riveting. Exceptional. What are some other words?
Grotesque.
Ooh, okay.
Nihilistic.
Yes.
Bleak.
Dark.
Warm.
Heavy. Warm?
I feel like the colors and textures, it feels very lived in. It feels like the crumbling suburb of your youth.
Immersive. all-encompassing, stifling.
Gritty.
Yes.
Welcome to our free association brainstorm.
I was going to say that was our NORCO word cloud. So NORCO came out on March 24th. It's developed by Geography of Robots and published by Raw Fury. It's available on PC and available through PC Game Pass, which is how I played the game. It is described as a Southern Gothic point-and-click narrative adventure that immerses the player in the sinking suburbs and verdant industrial swamps of a distorted South Louisiana. It also just last year won the first ever Tribeca Film Festival Games Award, which I didn't even know existed, which is super cool.
Yeah, I heard that too, and I thought it was really cool. That games were being given a category for the first time. And just for folks, for context, the Tribeca Film Festival Games Award recognizes an unreleased video game for its potential for excellence in art and storytelling through design, artistic mastery, and highly immersive worlds. I also thought, like, the jury that decided on these things was quite the stacked team.
Interesting collection of folks.
Range.
First, and obviously, Elijah Wood.
I mean, obviously.
Obviously, Elijah Wood. District 9 director Neil Blomkamp. Obviously. Tanya DePass, who's a streamer and founder of I Need Diverse Games and just all around cool person. You should definitely follow Tanya on Twitter. And the Hades art director, Gen Z.
Just a motley crew of game lovers.
I want to watch that team up movie. Like, give me that.
I want to be a fly on the wall for that combo.
So super cool that NORCO won that award. I think it's a little interesting that they're choosing to give it to an unreleased game, and I'm kind of wondering, like, what they see of the game before they give it an award, or like how you submit yourself to that category. But this is not a conversation about the Tribeca Film Festival, okay, folks? We are here to talk about NORCO and how absolutely flabbergasted it left both Spencer and I. This game is kind of mind-boggling and kind of hard to talk about. Spencer and I were kind of having a pre-conversation before going on mic, and we were both just kind of like doing some of that word association, doing a bit of like, how did this game make me feel? I'm not sure I understand the game. But I just want to preface any conversation we have about NORCO by saying, like, folks should go play NORCO. If you have, it's as a narrative point and click adventure, this game is pretty accessible to folks, even folks who don't, maybe you don't have a lot of experience with like game mechanics or stuff like that. There's very small, limited combat sections in the game there's really no fail state. It's very much a text on the screen, getting presented with a room or an area, and you're hovering over objects, clicking on them, reading more information about the objects, making dialogue decisions, or kind of not just dialogue, but decisions around how you want to think or contextualize about a thing in your head. And the story that plays out is surreal and dark and mysterious while still feeling very human and grounded and trying to reflect something about society. It's doing a lot, and it's also an incredibly well written game. Like this is one of those games that I say it's almost like a piece of literature in the line by line writing. It's very literary.
Yeah, the prose is stunning. Incredibly evocative. And as Jamie said, surreal. The one thing I might add to your description is it definitely has a bit of detective, investigative work feel, like studying a scene and trying to pick out things that might give you clues, or paying attention to areas you've been before. And there's this interesting mechanic of a mind map where there's all of these sort of disconnected thoughts that you're trying to fill in and make sense of, and all of these people and trying to figure out how it all, the web of intrigue, and to find the truth. And so I enjoyed that kind of gradual unearthing and piecing together of a bigger picture. It was a really cool way of moving through the narrative.
Yeah. And so speaking about the narrative, kind of the premise of the game is that you play as the main character, Kay, who is a young woman who's been living kind of a nomadic lifestyle on the road, traveling across the middle/west of the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
She was born and raised in Norco, Louisiana, but leaves home at a young age to kind of live this nomadic lifestyle. She's returned home at the beginning of the game because her mother has just died from cancer, brain cancer, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she comes home to find that her brother, she has a younger brother and he's missing.
Mm-hmm.
So her younger brother, Blake, is missing. Her mother has just died. Kay totally missed the funeral. You get a very strong sense that her and her mother were not on good terms, that they weren't even speaking before her mother's death, but she's kind of come back to get some of the affairs in order and check in with her brother. Her brother has asked her to come back, but then he's missing at the beginning of the game. So you're kind of trying to figure out where your brother is. You start to figure out that your mom was maybe involved in some interesting stuff before she died. There's a whole mystery around what your mom was looking into. And it's kind of goes all the way to the top in the sense that it's also tied in with Shield, which is the local oil company that kind of runs the town in a lot of ways, as well as a security robotics firm that is kind of ever present and spying on folks. So it's set in this time space that is not quite the future, but slightly futuristic. It's not set in our current time period. And it's not set in current Louisiana. It's feels like something that's very close to where we're at, but just far enough ahead that technology has progressed. I mean, for example, the family has a live-in robot. There's a robot that lives with them that is, or android, I guess you would say, it's humanistic presenting, and her name is Million, and she wears clothes and talks and can make decisions on her own. There's things like super AIs that exist in the world, specifically this AI called Super Duck that gives people gig work to do the things that make its machinations manifest within the world. So it's this interesting space of kind of the old head oil companies that feels very gritty and grounded in blue collar, and this encroaching tech space all kind of happening in this area of Louisiana that's kind of perpetually swampy and flooded and is actively experiencing climate change.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the setting that we come into the world with.
Absolutely. And I think something really interesting about the game, so it was created by this person Yutz, which is a pseudonym that they use as a way of separating their personal history from the creation of the game, which I think was really fascinating. But this person Yutz created the game to sort of make sense of their own upbringing. They were born in Norco, which is part of greater New Orleans, Louisiana. And there was this quick quote I'd love to add just to give folks just kind of set the stage for this game. It's from an article by Alexis Ong for PC Gamer. And Yutz says, "I think people are exhausted by the alienation and the dematerialization of the internet. And I think that there is a kind of new emergent regionalism, as well as a new kind of emergent sincerity that I can kind of see in my filter bubble." And Alexis writes, "If collapse already became the zeitgeist years ago, perhaps this emergent sincerity is simply the result of younger generations' increasing desperation and frustration with climate change, widening class divides, and virulent techno-capitalism. It's not romantic to be cynical and disaffected when we still have the power to do something about it, at the very least in our own backyards."
Yeah, I love that quote. And I think it's touching on, we see these themes that Alexis specifically is mentioning very, very clearly in the game: climate change, widening class divides, virulent techno-capitalism. These are core aspects of the story and the world that is built in Norco. And the last sentence that she has in that bit that you quoted, "It's not romantic to be cynical and disaffected when we still have the power to do something about it, at the very least in our own backyards." I think that's something that I'm still wrestling with about Norco in particular. And I don't know yet. Yeah, I beat this game last night from the day we're recording it. You finished it this morning. I think you and I are still very much in a processing place of trying to make sense of this game is all vibes. This game is all atmosphere and vibes. And it in like a really tangible way. And it's left me feeling things, but I'm not sure that I've made sense of those feelings yet. And so for this quote in particular to be saying like, it's not romantic to be cynical and disaffected, I don't think the game is presenting a romantic idea of being cynical and disaffected by the situation that we're in. But Alexa's saying like, when we still have the power to do something about it, at the very least in our own backyards, I do think that this game is really walking this middle line of trying to not even asking, but kind of say like, there's so many characters in this game that don't have or feel like they have agency or control over their own existence or over the things that are happening in the greater like world and space. And there's something about the way the game just reflects that without moralizing it, without really passing any judgment on it. And I'm not even sure the game is saying one way or the other if this is what we should or shouldn't be doing. Like, it's interesting to me what the game is trying to say about where like it's set in this slightly future time, but I think it's reflecting a place that we're actively in right now, which is feeling like so much of what is happening around climate change, around capitalism, around technology and the way it's expanding into every corner of our existence, it feels so far out of our control. And I think we're in this space where we can kind of decide what, if anything, we're going to do about that and how we're going to do it. And my thinking to date tends to be around like finding the community that I have, the influence that I have, and making space for things there, and just trying to make space for humanity as much as I can within that sphere of influence. And that is, it's small and potentially inconsequential in the grand scheme of all of the greater forces that are working against us. And in a lot of ways, NORCO is not even presenting characters who are taking that amount of agency. And yet it's still not demonizing them for doing so. This is a game about just getting by.
Yes.
In the face of overwhelming systems that are outside of our control. And I think it's that feeling of powerlessness is what is so prevalent for me right now, having just finished the game last night.
And just even in the face of a hopeless situation, of a crushing system, there's still human defiance. There's still that spark of life that prevents us from just going silently into that night. Like, even if there's no happy ending, we can still say fuck you on the way down. And I feel like there's something in that. Like, I'm still trying to unpack, but just that even the futility of the human condition doesn't mean that we have to give up. There are still things worth fighting for, even if you're just fighting for yourself. Like, I don't know. It really hit something. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think like, as you're saying that, I'm sitting here like reflecting on, I think the game does present us with several characters who are doing just that, who are saying like, basically understand that they have very little influence on the greater things that are happening around them. And yet they still take a minute to just kind of say like, fuck you. And I'm going to fuck this one small thing up for you before I'm snuffed out or I become completely inconsequential. And I guess I was tying a lot of it to the main character's narrative, which I think ends in a very... Well, we don't want to spoil anything, but I just don't think the main character doesn't have a traditional character growth arc, I don't think, in any real sense. And in fact, you don't really get a lot of sense of who Kay is as a person, which is rare for me. Instead, like, we really are experiencing all of the other characters in the game through Kay. She's kind of just like our cipher into the world. And so I think I was thinking a lot about like, well, what is the game saying about the world through Kay? And I actually think I was kind of looking at it in the wrong way. I think it's more about like, I think they're presenting this thesis statement, if the game has one, through the other characters that Kay is interacting with. So you kind of just flip flip that on its head for me a bit.
You're welcome.
Thank you. That's why we have these conversations.
There's one thing I want to go back to that you were saying earlier, back to this concept of you can control what's in your backyard, and how you are reaching for local community, even when things can feel hopeless. Like that really hit me. Like even as I was thinking about just that little story I shared when we first started this episode about reaching out to my neighbors, like this time, these past few years and ongoing, I mean, for me, looking around at all of the anti-trans rhetoric and very scary hate, just pure hate and scapegoating coming up in the US, making it feel like we're veering backwards. These years for everyone have been very isolating, feeling this complete lack of control, feeling fear of the future and the inevitability of things like climate change and, just the food shortages, housing crises. Like it's like a never ending onslaught of terrible bullshit. And there are days where I do feel immobilized by fear, by hopelessness, and feeling like, what can I possibly do? Or that there's somewhere else where if I just lived in this country, or if only I would, if maybe things would be different. And it's like, all of that is just fantasy. That's just my brain trying to come up with fantastical situations to make myself feel better, or to think that there's an escape route that will lead to, a greener pasture. And what I found is that, just reaching out to people across the street or down the road, just making that point of contact, like, I think I could have it would have been easy to go months feeling completely alone. I've lived here for a year and I had yet to meet other queer folks. And I think I could have very easily just continued to let myself feel isolated and hopeless and like that it's impossible to find community. But this idea of like a cute little hamlet, small town where everyone knows each other and goes over to each other's houses and everyone has a friend group like a sitcom is just, that doesn't really exist unless you make it. And it's not as hard as it feels to just make a connection. And so, I really am trying to internalize that your immediate community is where you can make the most impact, where you do have the most influence. And I don't know. I just thank you for bringing that up because it's like an important thing to remember, I think.
Yeah, 100%. So let's talk a bit about the atmosphere and vibes that I referenced, because this game has it's got a smell, it's got a texture to it. You feel it like on your skin in a way that I think very few games it managed to accomplish. There's a lot of games that have been thrown out as kind of comparative points for Norco. I don't know if any of them quite hit the mark. I've heard the game compared to Disco Elysium, and I think Disco Elysium is a much more robust, maybe is the word I'm looking for, like just has systems depth that does not exist in Norco. Norco is a very point and click adventure game, and even in that category of games, it's nowhere near as obtuse as a lot of point and click adventure games are. It's trying to be super accessible to anyone who wants to check this game out. Versus Disco Elysium, which is just, very dense, lots of systems, lots of RPG mechanics to deal with. So none of that is in Norco. But I think the comparison to Disco Elysium for me is more in the way that Disco Elysium has moments in the game where you will encounter, Disco Elysium also a super literary game like Norco. So I think that makes a lot of sense in terms of how they present their narrative, a lot of text-based, very deep literary writing. But Disco Elysium has moments of the game where you can encounter a line or go down a rabbit hole where suddenly the world opens up in a new way, and the game will actually shift perspective away from the main characters and present information about the town, community, someone else who exists in the world in a way that takes an almost omnipresent view of history, space, time.
Yes.
And that's something that Norco does too. There's a moment really early in the game that I think is a great example of this, which is that when Kay first arrives at her childhood home, you are looking at the house and you have kind of these options of how you can think about the house, and it gives you the option to think and learn more about the floods that have happened to the house, because again, this is in Louisiana. The house has been flooded several times, and when the menu first comes up, it says do you want to think about the first flood, the second flood, or the third flood? And if you go through you click on each one, and it'll kind of like present you with a memory that's very much from Kay's perspective, like, oh, when I was this age, this happened, and this is how we dealt with it. But if you look at all of those three of those memories and read the text for each one, a fourth option appears. It says the fourth flood. And if you click on the fourth flood, the actual image on the screen changes. You're no longer standing in front of your house and looking at the house. So you get this aerial view of the entirety of Norco, Louisiana, like almost like you're in a plane, and you can just see the lights of the different buildings and the fire coming up from the oil refineries. And it starts talking about how in a few years, the direction of the Mississippi River is going to change, and the entire neighborhood that your house currently exists in is going to be flooded, and your house is going to be razed to the ground. And it just takes this perspective in time and space through this like just simple little narrative moment that makes everything in the game feel both timeless and also inevitable. There's an inevitability to the way everything plays out in this game that I think that's like part of what speaks to that feeling of that stifling feeling.
Yeah.
And I do think that that's something that Disco Elysium does as well. And that's a good touch point in terms of how Norco builds its world.
Right. It starts to feel almost like gospel, like something prophetic. And
yes.
And that's just hitting me now as you're saying that, because there are these incredible themes of faith and identity that sort of, there's like an undercurrent of it at first, but the way that it ties the narrative together and the ultimate like climax of the story, surpasses into something entirely surreal and just pure emotion. Like, I think we were talking about, we're not sure yet if this game is even trying to make a specific statement about any of these themes that it's bringing up, or if it's really focused on just an experiential catharsis. Like, and I think hearing that, like, it ties too into that circular nature, that inevitability of this has already happened and it will happen again, and we are all hurtling towards something.
Yeah. And I think that kind of brings us to the next game that I would say this game has some there's some sinuous ties to. There's some connecting tissues, some connecting threads here, which is Kentucky Route Zero, which is a game that you and I played a year or so ago and absolutely loved. And I think in terms of presentation, in terms of the degree to which the game is surreal or not, Kentucky Route Zero, like these are Kentucky Route Zero and Norco are definitely dramatically different games, telling dramatically different stories. But I do think both games feeling very grounded in a working class space, a space of humans trying to get by under oppressive systems. In the way both games branch into surrealness, I do think there's a bit there, and I can see why people are making comparisons to Kentucky Route Zero, even though I do think the games are dramatically different.
Yeah, the magical realism, definitely, there's a connection there.
Yeah. What else is like comes up for you in terms of the like overall atmosphere of the game?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that the designer of the game, Aaron Gray, actually compared it to Kingdom Hearts.
That's bananas to me. Like, what? No.
He actually said that he says, I used to boot up Kingdom Hearts when I was a youngin' and just pretend to coexist in those spaces with these fun characters. I feel like Norco has a similar vibe. I definitely can see there's this, shifting party of sorts that sort of follows throughout the game, and the way that the game sort of changes perspective, expanding outside of just Kay, but even putting you in the shoes of others within this community, and the sort of, people coming along for different junctures of the journey, some staying, some leaving. And you're really spending a lot of time, just traveling with them, or exploring an area together. You can talk to them. You can sort of get more details about the world from them. So I suppose I can see that, but this is like a very adult and and dark Kingdom Hearts.
Although I don't know. I mean, I've heard some wild stuff about Kingdom Hearts. I think that goes places too. But
it's true. That's true.
It just like that's such a colorful and cartoonish like thing to suggest that Norco is similar to. But yeah, okay, sure.
I think too. I see it in the moments of levity. Like I think Kingdom Hearts has a bit of humor to it, and I see those moments in this game as well, which are very welcome pieces of respite.
I think that's definitely an important thing to bring up. There's a lot of humor in this game. I think anyone listening to us talk right now is probably like, oh, this sounds like a really like oppressively dark and depressing game. And there's definitely that in the game. But there is also so many fascinating characters. Like every person that you encounter in the game feels, even if they're only in the game for a few moments, like you can feel the history of them. Like they do a really good job humanizing the characters that you interact with, and they feel very real. They speak in a way that is specific to the game, but feels real and grounded. Characters have their own unique voices and their own backstories and relationships, and like they feel deep, even when you're not spending a lot of time with them. And several of the characters in the game are really funny. I chuckle. I was laughing out loud at several different moments, and there's just sometimes it's absurd humor. Sometimes it's there's a weird amount of like toilet humor in the game. But yeah, it really did make me laugh at multiple points.
Yeah, it's like this combination of this hyper local specificity. Like even locations in the game would be reminiscent to people who are from the area. And yet there's this really relatable, more universal aspect of, relating to family, community, some of the different themes we touched on that make it approachable to people who are not from the area. But I think the fact that it is rooted in that very specific place and made by people who have roots in that place, it does feel so realized. And it also just has that human nature to it where like you feel like these characters, are totally in this collapsing world, but they're still just like people from the swamps and bayous of Louisiana. There's still people who are townies. There's still people who, knew you when you were a baby and knew your mom and knew your grandfather. And just that sort of like very realistic reflection of like what these communities can be like rural communities, small town communities, suburban communities. Like it gives it that extra something that just makes it it's comfortable and lived in as much as it is alien and sci-fi. Like it has this amazing tension that makes it unlike anything else I've ever played.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And, you kind of, let's talk a bit about some of these themes that the game digs into, because I think, again, we don't want to go into spoilers, so we're going to leave a lot of specifics out of this conversation, but the amount of narrative depth, I'm just kind of blown away. I think one thing that I want to talk a bit about first is the way this game presents family. Kay is pretty estranged from her family. She's got a challenged relationship with her brother, who needs a certain degree of emotional support and care. That as the older sister, I think there was an expectation that she would provide some of it, and she kind of shirks that and decides to leave home and live a more nomadic lifestyle. And again, because we don't get a lot of we don't know a lot about Kay really, or her interior. That's not part of the game. We don't even really see her face for the entire game. Both her and her brother's faces are presented as kind of just these drawn-on smileys.
Like a scribbled smiley face.
A scribbled smiley face with just 2 pinpoints for the eyes. And I say smiley face, but she's not smiling. It's just a straight line for her mouth. So she's really not meant to be, I don't think we identify with her specifically. At least not in so much, at least not outside of like how we see her lived experience reflected in our own. But that was something that was connecting for me a bit. I am an older sibling. I do have a challenging relationship with my younger brother. I have a challenging relationship with my family. Family's not, my relationship with my family isn't what I had thought it would be, you know, as a kid growing up, and when your family's kind of your whole world, or at least a huge part of it. And then now to be where I am looking back, and I've come to a lot of terms with like what it is, but I think there was something in the way they presented the family as structure, as this thing that can so easily be disintegrated.
Yeah.
That really hit a nerve for me, that these family ties, I think we put a lot of weight on the idea that family connection is some end all be all of obligation and says something about who we are. And I think this game presents what is a very common situation for a lot of folks, which is that your family are just people that you know, and sometimes not even very well, and how easily that can not really say anything about a person or be a big part of their life. What what was resonating with you thematically?
I definitely want to talk about the use of water and the inevitability surrounding it. I think earlier you mentioned eventually the Mississippi River is going to change course and the Delta will be flooded and much of New Orleans will be destroyed. And rising water is just like one of those things that is impossible for humans to try and overcome. And I think the way that it's used throughout the game, in floods, in the swamps and lakes, in the, what it hides beneath, where it can pull you, how it can seem calm, but have strength and currents underneath, how just back to that theme of inevitable destruction and how that's constantly hanging over this community. Even something that, back to the creator Yutz, he talks about, or they talk about, how it's a constant fear of like, when is the next time New Orleans is going to flood? And at the same time, it's home. Like, I love it. I love that place, and it's a place I want to go back to, but I also know that someday I might not be able to. Like, I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to. And so I just felt it was so powerful. And even adding to, you said this game has a smell, and I think the water, the cypress trees, the smokestacks, the fires burning, the swamps, like it all, you can almost feel that choking humidity. You can feel the, the sound of frogs and bugs, and you can feel that water choking. And for a game that is primarily text-based and pixel art, I was struck by how immediate the imagery of the water felt.
Yeah. That's real. And it's reminding me a little bit too of this moment near the end of the game where you're getting this kind of vision of your home as you walk through it one last time, and you see your father, who died when you were very young. And he has this, it describes him as like standing in a kitchen that's slowly flooding, the water like coming up over the linoleum tiles. And he leans his hand against the wall and says, "You just don't think that it'll get bad. But when it does, you don't think there's any other way it can be. That's what gets me." And I feel like that sentence almost is like, there's so much in the game that I think that sentence holds. The relationship with the family, the flooding, the way society is like slowly collapsing, the pervasiveness of it, like so many things in the game. People are existing in what has become what you wouldn't have thought was going to become a bad situation, or like when it started, we didn't think it was going to get here. And now it's here and you don't see any way out of it. And you kind of accept it for what it is rather than trying to change or fix it. if you even could. So yeah.
That reminds me, I saw a quote. It must have been a tweet or something. Speaking of pervasiveness of the internet, but it was like, times are allowed to be good. Like, you're allowed to have periods of rest. And I feel like so often our lives become defined by putting out one fire to the next, or like, oh no, like this bad thing has happened and that's defining me. And it's like, we often don't, or sometimes find that we don't allow ourselves to be in the moment and look around when times are good and to let ourselves enjoy it, because we're constantly awaiting the next shoe to drop. And so I think too, from the quote you were saying, like, humans, we very quickly adjust to bad situations. We very quickly adapt and create a new normal, and we can start to forget what it looked like before. And so I think, I don't know, it just gives me a lot to think about in just being more mindful, maybe. And also remembering that good and bad times are part of life. And, you know, the pursuit of happiness isn't really arriving at a place. It's changing your perspective of how you view your own life and giving yourself the space to see it as it is, not as you would hope it would be.
Yeah. One more theme that I want to talk a little bit about is the game, and I'm still really processing like what is being said here, but there's a lot in the game that's trying to talk about faith, like religion, spirituality, and also like, but faith in that way, faith in the sense of like organized religion. Like, there's a cult in the game that plays a pretty significant role, and there's a couple different religious leaders that the game presents. But then there's also just kind of like what I would say are like more vaguer spiritual concepts of like the energy of the universe and how we try to grapple with that as like silly little humans making up answers. And there's this weird power struggle that happens in the game for, again, we're trying not to spoil anything. So there's a power struggle that happens around trying to control something that I think is symbolic of the energy of the universe, God. There's all of these different characters in the game ascribing something to this thing, this MacGuffin or whatever that you're looking for a portion of the game. There's all these different characters ascribing things to this thing that you're looking for. And it means different things to each person. They've all kind of built up this belief system around what it's going to do for them, right? All of these different power players coming from all of these different aspects. The oil company is after this thing. The cybersecurity firm is, technology, corporations, and religion are all after this thing. And the thing ultimately is everything and nothing. It's a destructive force that is both ruins everything and does nothing at the same time. Everyone kind of like implodes upon themselves.
Like the oil refineries, the tech companies, the religious groups, they're all trying to capture and use that thing, but it's something that is impossible to be contained. It's the indifference of the universe, and it's also the love of the universe. It's the inevitability of life. It's energy. It's whatever ineffable quality makes us who we are. Like, it's impossible to control, and capitalism is going to run us into the ground in our pursuit of being something more than what we are. And the hubris there.
Yeah. And at the same time, it is not entirely indifferent to us. There's a relationship that Kay and Kay's mother have with this thing that feels spiritual to me. That feels like faith with a small f. That feels like, believing and accepting that there is something out there that maybe it's not going to do what you want it to do in the way that we might think of traditionally, like, I'm going to pray for X thing to happen. And, it's like that childish belief system of like, I'm going to kneel down and I'm going to pray that I get that Lego set for Christmas, and then God will make sure that Santa brings me the Lego set. But it's the connection to something larger than ourselves, while still understanding that while that thing cares for us, it's not going to do anything for us specifically.
Yeah. And that we're meant to die, I think, too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no one is going to escape this.
So on that bleak note, no, but seriously, like, this game is, I mean, I'm going to be thinking about this game for a few more weeks, I think, and just chewing on it.
Yeah.
And maybe even replaying portions of it. It was so, we didn't really talk about how gorgeous the artwork is, but the detailed pixel art in this, they use a lot of blues and oranges, and it feels, there's just so much, like, you feel like you can touch this game. Yeah. And this game has touched me. Yeah.
There's a quote that I want to share that maybe to carry us out.
Yeah, let's do it.
It's a conversation that happens pretty late in the game, and I think ties into some of what we were covering with the explorations of faith and these cults and the ways humans strive to escape our fate. And this character says, "No one is satisfied here. We're trapped in this limbo, a long twilight that bleeds out to the edges of time, where even the most fantastic things become banal. This gray blanket of stale time, stagnant, lonely time. To puncture it, to punch a hole in it. I understand the appeal. I do."
Yeah.
NORCO!
Go play NORCO, folks. What a fantastic game. Time to move over to our interview. And today we're talking to Vaneet Mehta. He's a software engineer, writer, and public speaker working to increase bi-visibility through his activism. We had a wonderful conversation with Vaneet discussing bisexuality erasure, the importance of finding your queer community, the concept of playersexuality, and what modern games get wrong when they make queer representation and content optional. We really enjoyed chatting with Vaneet, and I'm sure you all will too. So without further ado, here's our interview with Vaneet Mehta.
Hello to our wonderful guest, and thank you so much for joining us in the virtual Pixel Therapy studio. To start, can you share your name and your pronouns?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Vaneet Mehta. My pronouns are he, him.
And Vaneet, how do you spend your time?
Oh, big question. So, my main job is a software engineer, so I guess I spend a lot of time doing that. But on the side, I also do a lot of, like, activism-y stuff. I don't know. I always don't know what to call it. But I do a lot of writing around bisexuality and about being bisexual and a person of color. So, because I'm Indian. So I talk a lot about that. I volunteer in the community sometimes. I've been involved in several projects and helped out with certain things. And then outside of all of that, I guess I play a lot of video games and binge a lot of TV.
Love it. Love that. And Vaneet, I just wanted to comment that, like, as someone who is a writer and a community builder, and that being a channel for your advocacy for your community, I just wanted to note that I think it's amazing that you are literally putting content out there in such a vulnerable way. Since I feel like for so many bisexual folks, like including myself in that, that like my own understanding of myself and my coming out was really delayed by just not even having the language or knowing that that was a possibility until someone else like spoke it into existence for me. And so like specifically, like you're literally doing that. You're putting words out there that resonate with others. And I hopefully, helping someone else come to that conclusion earlier and find your work that speaks to such a specific audience. I was wondering if that resonated with you at all and kind of what drew you to this work.
Yeah, I mean, that is literally it. Like for me, I didn't find out the word bisexual until I was 17, despite having feelings way before that, probably around like 12, 13, maybe earlier. And didn't know what it was because I was like, well, there's gay and there's straight, and is that gay then? Am I gay? And I didn't know this word existed. And I finally found this word, and everyone laughed about it, and everyone said it was stupid and doesn't make sense and isn't real. And so I couldn't see myself as seeing it as real because I didn't know anyone who was using it apart from this one person who everyone said was lying. I didn't see it in media. I didn't see celebrities. I didn't see anyone living this life who wasn't maybe just like someone people saw as like another dumb kid. And so for me, I was like, it took me until I was about 25 to really look at that word, because and stop denying it, really, because I was just denying my attraction to men. I was like, that's not a thing. I can't see validity in that because X, Y, Z, and kept finding reasons. And it wasn't until I just couldn't deny it anymore that I was like, well, I guess I have to pick this word because I don't understand what else it could be. And I still found that trouble of like, I don't know if what I'm saying is real. I don't know if anyone else is going to see what I'm saying is real. I don't know if I'm going to experience the exact same reaction. And I definitely did. I definitely experienced people who were like, yeah, but you're probably more gay, right? You're probably more this. And so I always say with my work that, you know, a lot of people go, well, what are you doing it for? Are you trying to do this or that or that? It's why I often get weirded out by saying the word activism, because I don't feel like I'm really trying to change like policies or government or this or that. And I'm not really like making my own space. I'm just trying to help where possible. And so much of what I'm trying to do is really just, if I help one person, if one person sees this, reads this, watches this, whatever, and goes, hey, I see that, and maybe that's me. That's job done for me. I'm like, great, I helped someone. That's all it is. That's all I'm trying to do.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing that. And I think too, what you're saying is an important reminder to all of us that like this work happens on multiple levels. Like changing policy isn't the only thing that's going to save us or going to liberate us. Like the work has to start internally and in among the people in our immediate sphere of influence. Because that's where we have the most power, is really the people that we have direct connections with. And two, like the work isn't sustainable if we're not taking care of ourselves, celebrating each other, sharing love with each other, seeing each other. So I think that the work you're doing is incredibly important, even if it's not something as, high up as like changing policy.
Thank you.
So I just think what you spoke on too is so true. Like when, like just loving yourself is a radical act when you live in a society that is constantly telling us, I mean, looking at in media and my own experiences in school and just what our heteronormative society tells us is like, you're doing something wrong. You're tricking people. You haven't made up your mind. Even if you're with someone, it's just a matter of time until, there's this myth. I think I see it a lot in TV shows and stuff where like bisexual people are just like constantly trying to hook up and they're not faithful because for some reason being attracted to more types of people means that we're not content. I don't know. So it's hard. It's hard to feel valid, and it's also hard to feel unashamed, I think, sometimes of embracing bisexuality.
Yeah, and I think, it's difficult because so much of society is trying to paint certain things as bad, and they pair it up with other things that people see as bad. And it's like, actually, no, both of those are fine. Like, so often you see people being like, oh, well, all bi people are polyamorous. I'm like, well, one, they aren't, but two, why is that a bad thing? And it's because people see polyamory as a bad thing, and they go, well, it's greedy, right? Like, you can't just be happy with one. And it's like, what? No, there's nothing, that's not what that means. But also, like, who cares? Who cares if people want more than one person in their lives? Like, it's a ridiculous game that people try to play because they are just trying to buy into this heteronormative sort of monosexes. They're trying to buy into the lifestyle that the world is trying to sell us, is that you settle down with one person of the quote unquote opposite sex, and you settle down and you get married and buy a house and have kids. And I'm like, right, but that is not what a lot of people want. Like, there's multiple things in there that I don't want. Definitely don't want kids. And it's people are so obsessed with trying to buy into that any time that they see something that strays away from it, they see, well, that's bad. We're often seen as like destroying something. Like, you know, when people are trying to fight for like gay marriage, so you're destroying the sanctity of marriage. And that is exactly what people say about stuff like bisexual and polyamory and like other identities like non-binary and asexual. You're trying to destroy something. You're trying to ruin something. You're trying to harm other people. And it's like, no, what we're trying to do is exist.
Absolutely.
What we're trying to do is exist and be ourselves. And you're so obsessed with trying to grind everyone else down to be just like you. That you can't seem to accept other people.
Yeah. Two things there. One, I feel like one of the most important things, like I feel like the core of polyamory is this understanding that love is not a finite resource that can be divided. Love is infinite and it multiplies. And I think we see that in friendships. Like, there's no such thing as like, I only have one friend. And if my friend hangs out with other people, then they're not a good friend. We don't see that with, family. It's not a new person comes into our family or marries into our family. We don't say, sorry, no more room.
Like, you know, I'm like a very monogamous person personally, but I totally understand the concept of like, not one person is going to fulfill everything in your life, and it's okay to have other people. Like, I know a lot of people don't get that, because a lot of people, they're like, oh, I have a partner, and the rest of their life just fades away. They lose all kind of friendships and all that sort of stuff. But for me, I'm just like, no, not one person is going to fulfill everything. Like, yeah, I'm happy I have a partner, but I also have my friends, and they're important to me, and I want quality time with them because they all give me something else in my life.
Absolutely.
And I think that can extend to anything. So, like you said, it's similar with friendships. Why can't it be the same with love?
And two, if the sanctity of your bond is threatened by two or more other people doing something that has absolutely nothing to do with you, then it must not have been that sacred to begin with.
Right. I think that's the thing that always gets me. It's like, right, so your whole marriage is destroyed by someone else getting mad. That's a shaky marriage.
Why are you so obsessed with me? So, Vaneet, you've written quite a lot on your Medium blog, as well as for other outlets, in just sharing your personal story as a way to advocate for the community at large. And in an article you wrote for Queermunity magazine about your personal coming out story, you shared some really important and sobering statistics, I think, for people who may not be paying attention to this stuff, which our society makes sure that they are not. But I wanted to share some of those numbers and talk about them a little bit. So according to Stonewall Foundation's Home and Communities report that came out in 2018, it shared that only 14% of bisexual men are out to their whole family, and 46%, almost half of bisexual men aren't out to even one person in their family. Just imagine how isolating that must feel, and the shame involved, and feeling like you can't tell even one person in your family about yourself. Additionally, over half of bisexual men report suffering from anxiety, and 43% have had suicidal thoughts. It's just, I think we don't talk enough about the lack of just mental health support, and also just freedom to be flexible, that I think to explore, to embrace your softer sides. Like I think men and masculine leaning folks are often put into this box that allows them to only be a certain way. I don't know if you had any additional thoughts you wanted to share about that particular phenomenon.
Oh, how long have we got? The thing that I write about a lot is, as a kid and even to this day, I am so far removed from what people consider masculinity. Like, for obviously people are listening, so they can't see me, but I do not have like a haircut that men would have. So much so that like anytime I've been to a barber, they're like, "Oh, it's a very feminine cut." People would, I'm very emotional. I've always been very emotional. I like soft toys. I have so many of them. I've not got them here, but I do have them still at my parents' place because I was like, I can't bring this giant bag with me. I have a few here. And it's just like there's a lot of these things which I was berated for when I was growing up. My dad would constantly tell me, when are you going to grow up? When are you going to stop being a girl? Stop crying. Stop crying is what girls do. And it's I dealt with it a lot. I had a lot of expectations thrust upon me of like, why don't you work out? Why don't you have that kind of body? Why don't you do this? Why aren't you into sports? And even like stupid things, like, we're talking about video games. Why don't you play Call of Duty and FIFA? I was like, because they're shit. Like, what am I supposed to do? I cannot think of anything more boring. Like, I definitely played FIFA when I was a kid. Like, I loved FIFA 98. But like every year it's the same game, and you just keep buying it at 40 quid a pop.
Like, we get it. Thank you.
and I cannot express how much I dislike playing games with guns. Like, it's not just Call of Duty. If you put a gun in your game and that is your main game mechanic, I'm not playing. Yeah. I'm not going to buy this game. Like, it's just not fun for me. I don't find it fun walking around being stealthy, trying to shoot people. I'm bored. And there was always these expectations of what to act like and how to be. And I didn't fall into any of that. And it constantly meant that I was mocked. I was told that I was gay before I was having these feelings that I was hiding, but people would think I was gay anyway because I'm not acting like a man, and that's all it really takes. And there's like a whole theory behind that of like people think that in society that if you're feminine, you're gay, and if you're gay, then you're feminine. I actually wrote a whole bunch of that. I won't go into it now, but like a whole bunch of that in my book about bisexual men. But there's a lot that can be said about this. And yeah, I think we don't allow men to do any of this stuff. And I think so often this stems from misogyny. It stems from the idea that women are seen as lesser, and therefore a man showing womanly traits is degrading to himself. So yeah, I think it's so often a struggle. And when it comes to stuff like bisexuality and, all of those statistics, I'm not surprised because I struggled with depression and anxiety and suicidal ideation, and I've written about all of this. I was worried about coming out, and I think it's because of the fact that it's not just the idea that being gay and like a man showing feelings for another man is a bad thing, but it's also the idea of like, well, since I'm attracted to who I'm supposed to be attracted to, aka women, I can just live that life, I guess, and it will appease people. And I've spoken to people who are like, well, I was in a happy marriage with a woman. I wanted absolutely nothing to change, but I wasn't being me. And I wasn't telling people who I was. I wasn't telling the person I love the most in my life who I actually am. And I felt like I was hiding myself and putting up a mask. And I think that is what stops people. It's like, well, what if I do come out and then I have to ruin my whole entire life for what? I'm in a happy marriage. I love her. There's nothing changing here. But at the same time there is, because I'm not being me. And when we live in a society that constantly says the world is binaries, it's man and woman, it's male and female, it's straight and gay, people just don't see bisexual as real. And so it's not only the internalized of like, this isn't real, I'm not actually bisexual, I'm in denial. But also you come out and say you're a man in a relationship with a woman, you come out and you tell her and she might go, oh, so you're gay, I'm leaving you. And yeah, there's a lot
It's a lot.
we can say here.
Yeah. And I think too, there's an added layer of fear or of risk, because as you're speaking to, like, coming out isn't just a matter of stepping into your truth. It also means that stepping into your truth opens you up to ridicule, to shame, to people not believing you, feeling like you need to justify your existence, like lack of safety, like there's security in just leaning into a heteronormative identity, to just staying with a partner because it's easy for others to understand. It's like, you know, generally how the trajectory of your life is going to go thanks to the stories that our society tells. And so I can absolutely see I've experienced the same thing.
And then it comes to this double-edged sword, because then people go, oh, so bisexual is easier because you can just be straight. You can just be straight and it's fine, right? Because you're happy. You're in a relationship with someone and you're happy and nothing has to change, and you're going to be in this relationship which everyone perceives as straight, and therefore no one's going to harm you. And it's like, first of all, are you constantly being seen in this relationship? Like, I constantly fight this idea of like, okay, well then what if a gay person isn't in a relationship? Then does that mean that they're not going to get any homophobic bullying? Like that's not how homophobia works. Homophobia is based on what you perceive someone as. And if someone looks queer, they're going to get bullied. Right? And there are plenty of gay people who probably don't, and there are plenty of bi people who probably do look queer. So there's, again, so much to unpack there. Yeah. But people then think it's easier because you can just go into that life, and I was like, well, you're happy in it. And it's like, well, yes and no. Yes, they're happy in this relationship and they're in love and blah, blah, blah. But in the inside, they're struggling because they feel like they can't tell the world or even tell their partner who they are, and they feel like they're living a lie. It's a double-edged sword, but people just go, nah, you've got it easy. And it's like, okay, because apparently everything that is wrong, everything that we deal with, it comes down to whether we get punched in the street or not, and nothing else.
Yeah, it's a lot more nuanced than that.
Yeah.
So, something that you've talked about, Vaneet, is just how scary it can be coming out, sort of shaking up what's known, what's comfortable, and sort of forging a new path, finding new community. And one of the things I noticed in some of your personal essays, or one of them in particular, is that you mentioned that joining the London Gamers community. And that's, for folks listening, that's Gamers, Gaymers. And you joined the London Gamers community, and it was super impactful for you, helping you find friends and grow your network just with other folks who share both this identity and interest. And I'm curious, why was it so transformative to find this particular community for you?
For me, I think the thing that I struggled with when I first came out, so I first came out at the beginning of 2017, and that includes basically to myself. And at the end of 2017, I was like, well, okay, I need to, I've lost, I had a bit of a turbulent year. And I lost quite a few friends, and I was like, well, I need to find friends. How do I go and find friends? And I also need to find a community because I need to talk to people about my queerness and what I'm going through. How do I do that? And I think for me, I was like, I can't just go to a club. How am I going to make friends like that? And I think that's firstly one of the biggest flaws in our community, is that so much of our community revolves around clubs and pubs partying and drinking, and there's not really a space where you can just meet people and make friends. But I think that's why this was so important, is for me, it was such a bridging gap. I'd been in gaming communities for the last few years. I've been playing video games since I was 3-4 years old. Gaming is something I knew. And so I was like, well, I can go into this space, and if nothing else, I have something to talk about, because they will say, what games are you playing? Or I can go, what games are you playing? And we can talk about video games. But there's that added layer of they are also like me in terms of my identity. And so we can then talk about that as well. And I think that's why that community was so important for me, because it was a bridging gap. It was going from something I already know to something I have no idea about, and being able to connect the two and go, right, now I can meet people. And I've made lifelong friends with that. I have a little group of friends who I'm actually going to see tomorrow.
Nice.
And we talk all the time, and I've met them through this community. And we talk about video games all the time. Like, I message my friend and be like, oh, I'm on this on Arceus now. And they're like, I've moved on. I think they're playing like Gran Turismo now, but they decided they wanted a PS5. And I was like, for what games? Like, all the games are also being released on PS4. And they're like, yeah, but I'm not going to buy a PS4 this late in the game. And I was like, so I think for me, it really helped me be able to find people who are like me, but it's not all about identity. And like, because I'm not just my identity, right? I wanted people to talk to about more than just my bisexuality, but I also wanted to talk about that too and be like, hey, I've just come out and like, I am not having a fun time, and have people rally around me. And so like, you know, I came out to my mum and I had them they was like messaging me and being like, oh my God, you just came out to your mum. How was that? How are you doing? Congratulations, blah, blah, blah.
That's awesome.
And so it was really nice having that support. Just as I was like, I guess, I say finishing coming out. Coming out is a lifetime process, but like in terms of the people who were currently in my life, and coming out to my family, like that for me was like the milestone of like, right, I've done that now. And now going forward, I can say my sexuality up front, and that's just the thing. So yeah, I think that's why the community was so important for me.
No, yeah, thank you for that. I think that's a really great point. Like when I think back to where I met people and built my own queer community and queer network, it was through like hookup apps, like anonymous like message boards where people cruising groups and like BDSM play parties. So like, and I think now I'm at a point where I'm doing a lot of trauma work. I'm sort of unpacking a lot of who I was in my early 20s and why I engaged with the places I did. And this is not at all any sort of blanket statement saying anything negative about hookup culture or BDSM or anything like that. But I think for me personally, I'm at a point where I'm like, okay, what are my sober space options? Like where do the nerdy queers hang out? And we really don't, all the lesbian bars are gone in Massachusetts. We don't really have sober spaces for queer folks to gather. We don't really, it's hard to not always feel like your identity needs to come first when sort of like introducing yourself or meeting other people in sort of the spaces that we occupy. And so I think having that shared context of games, not even like having your identity necessarily be part of the conversation yet until you're ready. I think it's an amazing point and really true. And I need to find a gaming group near me.
I definitely recommend it. I definitely do.
Vaneet, tell us a little bit more about your personal history with gaming. Do you consider yourself to be a capital G gamer?
Oh my God. Like, I don't know. I go back and forth on that because like, people love to gatekeep, and I find it exhausting. I find the whole gatekeeping in our community exhausting. The number of times I've been told you're not a real gamer, quote unquote. And there's so many times where I'm like, oh, I'm a gamer. And I'm like, actually, do I want to be a gamer because y'all are messy? Like, y'all have the shittest politics in the world, and y'all are just obsessed with like, I'm a better gamer than you. And I just find it ridiculous because for me, like hobbies are about connecting with other people.
Yes.
And so often people love to be like, well, I'm more into that than you. And I'm like, says who? It's like, I once had this conversation with someone who was like, well, I'm more of a Leighton, like Professor Leighton fan than you are. And I was like, how? And they're like, oh, because I cosplayed as him, so clearly I like him more. And I was like, what? What do you mean?
I
I once had someone be like, oh, what kind of games do you normally play? And I was like, well, mainly Nintendo these days. And they were like, oh, so you're not a real gamer then? Like, real gamers play stuff on all consoles and platforms. And I was like, oh, they play what
Must
they like?
Nice. Yeah.
They play what they like? Yeah, right. Anyway, history with gaming. So I grew up with video games. I started playing games when I was like 3, 4, 5 years old. We got like, I can't remember which one came first because I was so young and time didn't mean anything back then, at least looking back. But one of the first things we had was a Game Boy. I say my brother got it and he would constantly ban me from it, but I was still sneaking
but it's still we.
Yeah. My mom would be like, it's for you, it's for all of you. And I was like, Mom, how do we share Pokemon with this guy who has control issues? And then we also had a Super Nintendo that our neighbor randomly gave us for some reason. And so some of my earliest memories of video games are Super Mario Land. I was actually talking to my boyfriend earlier because he was showing me this GIF that I've seen quite some time ago, but like it's always funny, is when it's like a GIF when Mario's riding Yoshi and he jumps for the gate and then jumps off Yoshi to hit the gate, and Yoshi's like crying and then gets really angry. It's like, how dare you? And Mario's like, fuck you, I'm winning the game with or without you. And I was like, when I was a kid, if I lost Yoshi, I would just straight up kill myself. Because I'm like, I'm not playing
we
this
reached the
without
flag
Yoshi.
together. Yeah.
I only actually care about Yoshi. Mario is secondary in this game. If I could play as Yoshi, I would. Somehow I never played Yoshi's Island.
Oh man, I was about to say, Yoshi's Island was my
I
jam.
never knew about it.
Such a great game.
But I loved playing Super Mario Land. Super Mario World, right? Super Mario World. God, I feel like a noob right now. Super Mario World. Pokemon, obviously. Like the underrated gem that is Mario Paint. The fact that they haven't the fact that they haven't made a sequel. Like, how dare you? How absolutely dare you?
I know there was such an experimentation phase. We had like Paper Mario. We had like Superstar Saga with Mario and Luigi working together. I'm like, bring back the experimental Mario.
Right. Like, oh my God, I need them to just do more like interesting stuff. Like, because you get really fun to think. Remember when they did Luigi's Mansion? And it was like, oh my God. How, like, that was... Like, I love the sequels, but the first one is just iconic. Like, all of the, like, different paintings and, like, having a baby and being in the crib. What a moment. What a moment of, like, a baby terrorizing you as you were tiny in their crib. Like, but, yeah, that and okay, Kirby. Actually got, like, the new Kirby game. There's, like, a special game for the mouse mat as well.
Vaneet's, holding up a giant Kirby... mouse pad. It's very adorable.
Like, I remember playing the first Kirby game, Kirby's Dream Land, on the Game Boy. Again, my brother used to not let me play it, but I was just like, every time he was not there, I was like, I'm gonna play Kirby. And it was so difficult because you had to do it in one run. Otherwise, and if you die, you're dead, you're dying again. And I remember the moment when I did it, and I felt like that's where my life peaked to this day. Like, that is where my life peaked. I was like, I finished Kirby's Dream Land. I don't know if I'll ever be able to do that again in my life. It was such a good game. And I've been obsessed ever since. I'm a Nintendo boy at heart. Anyone who knows, I'm probably going to plug it at the end, but like my social media is Nintendo Mad 888. I vow to one day get verified with that username and be like, yeah, suck it.
I look forward to that
Nintendo Mad
day.
888 is a blue tick. But, like, it is my one true passion. And I'm one of those people where like people will call me a fanboy, and I'm like, actually, I get it, but I will be the first person to stand up and criticize Nintendo anytime they misstep. Okay. Let's face it, the Wii U was not their strongest moment.
We don't know her.
It had some gem games, but my God, the marketing on that console was horrendous. And I've played other stuff. Age of Empires is high key. Age of Empires 2, like, hands down one of my favorite games of all time. I wasn't good at it, but I loved every second of it. Theme Hospital, Sims, all of that stuff. And then a PlayStation. I have a PlayStation 4. I used to have PlayStation 1 and 2. Never had a PlayStation 3. My brother did and didn't let me play it. He didn't grow out of that. He did not grow out of that.
No, clearly not. Vaneet, I wanted to touch on a concept that you brought up to us just sort of when we were getting into, what are we going to talk about on the show today? And as you mentioned, you don't shy away from giving criticism where it's needed and thinking critically about the games you play. And I wanted to touch on the concept of player sexuality that you brought up to us and how that it gets confused for queer representation. And so for folks who aren't aware of the concept, there's a piece by Elena Cole for Game Developer, previously known as Game Sutra, folks are familiar, where she writes, player sexuality describes the phenomenon of romanceable non-player characters being interested in the player character regardless of their gender, typically in very heteronormative game worlds. It's easy for developers to implement as they don't need to change these characters' interactions with the player based on the gender selected during character creation. And because it's entirely optional, it allows developers to basically appeal to those who are interested in queer relationships while making them avoidable for any homophobic players who are picking up the game. And so, Vaneet, why is player sexuality actually not great for queer representation and inclusion?
I mean, that last part is the part that really strikes home, is if it wasn't for the fact that you're going out there trying to make that happen in the game, you're not gonna see it. Mm-hmm. And for me, that does not give representation. I think, it's still something and I still enjoy it, but for me, it's not explicitly there, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing that I find is that it's, even if you know it's there, sometimes still making it happen is not easy. And also the question comes up of well, how do you know it's there, right? So, firstly, the fact that we live in a society where we have technology and people write about this stuff is what tells us it's there. If you don't read the article that happens to tell you, if you're not online enough to know that this game that you have decided to buy has an option for you to make your character queer, you may never see it. So that's first of all. You're never going to see the queer representation unless you're told that it's in the game. And if you miss that, then don't know it. I could, this is an example of asexual, but for example, in Ghost of Tsushima, I was mainly focusing on the main narrative because I'm I have way too many games to play, and if I don't do the main narrative, I may never finish this game.
Valid.
There was a side quest where they revealed one of the characters as queer. How was I supposed to know if no one told me? How was I supposed to play it? How was I supposed to see it? If it's not in the main game, you can't guarantee someone's going to play the side quest. Second of all, it's how easy is it to actually make it happen. For example, I played Life is Strange 2. I was told that there was a romanceable option, a man that you can romance and a woman that you can romance. I tried to romance the man. It did not happen. Why? Because I selected the wrong choice. And sometimes it's completely it doesn't follow through. It's okay, I want to romance you. And it's right, but then you got to do this thing that will make him happy. And I was right, but the thing that he wants to do is not something I want to do. So now what? And it's so I got to do the thing I don't want to do just so I can romance the guy. So that's part 2. But part 3 is, like you said, it's then completely avoidable for people who just don't want to see it. And I don't think that is in and of itself representation, because if someone is queerphobic, they can just go, well, it's not going to happen in my game. In my game, the player is straight, and they'll just make them straight. And there'll be no allusion to queerness because they will never click those options. They will never make those options happen. And so the player that they're playing as will be straight. There are other characters who are romanceable, they will not give the indication that you could romance them because they're not selecting those options. And then those characters aren't expressing a sexuality outside of what the player is choosing to do. If the player talked to these characters and the characters were like, well, I'm interested in men, and you're playing as a man, and you're like, okay, so they're gay or bi or something, then it's like, okay, then at least you know it's there. And they might be, if they're homophobic, they'll be like, oh, I hate that, and don't do it. But they've seen it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they know that character's queer.
Yeah.
And that is at least something. But
Absolutely.
they can just never click those options. They will never see it. And therefore, how can you say that the character's queer when it's entirely up to what the player's choosing?
Right. Like, on one hand, it's like, where's that character's autonomy and personhood? Like, it's not just up to me to define, like, what everyone else's sexuality is. And on the other hand, I feel like player sexuality sort of confirms this harmful narrative that queer relationships are just straight relationships with a different coat on, that like we all strive for heteronormativity, or we all strive for a relationship unfolding in a certain way, which just is not true. Like, there is no relationship where your identity, your lived experiences aren't part of the conversation. And so to act as though you can just flip a switch and it's the same thing, just like further incorrectly reinforces heteronormativity as the standard and all of that is wrapped up in that.
Especially when you think of something like Life is Strange, which has so much narrative around certain levels of oppression and certain things that people deal with, such as racism, sexism, all sorts of stuff in those games. You would think that if the player was actually queer, that would be part of the conversation that they're having with you about their hardship. They're sitting there and there's a guitar drumming in the background and they're having a really thoughtful moment with you, but they're not talking about their damage of being a queer person. It's interesting, like, how that can just be admitted from the things that person's had to deal with in their life. And I'm not saying that, I want stories which are completely centered and focused around queer trauma, but like you said, our experiences are different. It's a bit like how you have some shows where they're like, oh yeah, and that character is bisexual or gay or whatever, and it's like, right, but everyone else is straight. And they think, oh well, we've got the representation. I'm like, right, but like, I'm sorry, but I can't remember the last time I spoke to a cishet person. So, like, what world are they in? They have no queer friend.
Right, they're just the token friend. That's
they have no queer. What queer person has no queer friend? I feel very hurt for this character. They have no queer friends.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, Vaneet, we've touched a bit on where, things could be better and where we see opportunity areas that could be improved. What are some games that you've played where you really felt seen, or you really felt like it did queer representation right?
I honestly feel like indies are hitting it out the bag. Like, I think indies are doing the most in terms of seeing the holes that all these AAA people are absolutely refusing to fill because they're worried about their core market. And they're obsessed with the idea that their core market are like 30-year-old pasty white boys who live in their mum's basement. That they are so afraid to step out of that. And indies are like, no, we're going to appeal to people who exist. One of my favorite games is Dream Daddy. Like, it's just so fun and so silly, and it really talks about queerness in so many different ways. It has so many different types of representation. For me, one of the big things, because like often when I'm looking at representation, it's not just queerness but also POC. Up until that point, I was so used to just playing a white protagonist, and if I do get a color option, it's like, okay, there was one brown skin shade and one black skin shade, and that's all you're getting. I'm looking at you, Pokemon, who have two white skin shades anyway. Dream Daddy had a whole color wheel. Like, it had a whole color wheel, and I was obsessed. I was like, oh my god, I've never I've never played a game like this. And I was like having an existential crisis of like what level of brown I am. I've never had to think about what level of brown I am until this point in my life. And I was like, that one? No. That one? No. Oh my God, there's too much choice. But it was fantastic. Like, it has so many different options. I think they even have a trans option because they have, like, from what I could tell, they had a body and it had binding tape on there. And I was like, is that? And I just love that. I just love the fact that they poured their very heart into making this inclusive and making people feel like they could be their perfect dream daddy and romance all the daddies. And they have so many different options. And it really shows that like queer people come in all shapes and all colors and all forms and all interests, that we're not all just this monolith and we're not all the same. They had people who are, you know, very, very daddy type. They had people who were like emo and people who were really into music and people who were the dark brooding type and the very overly queer one. And it was from so many different walks of life and so many different struggles that these people were dealing with. So I absolutely loved that. Another game that I loved, which isn't necessarily queer representation, but is very strongly POC, is Raji. I think it's called Raji, an Ancient Epic. I haven't finished it. I only played a couple of hours so far. But I played it and it had all of these cutscenes and all of this, like, I was just very overwhelmed. I was sitting there and I was like, I have never seen a game which has Vishnu and Shiva and they're talking to each other, and I don't think it's Shiva, but like they have like these gods and goddesses from Hindu mythology, and they're helping out this girl to try and save her brother. And it, like, from the music to the colors to the like drawings and art style, it just felt so off my culture in a way that I feel like I've never seen before. And so that for me did a lot. I was amazed by that. And although I just spent a while like slagging off Life is Strange, I do really appreciate the fact that it has these options. There's other issues there as well. I won't go into it because I know you said before the podcast that you just started Life is Strange with the first one.
Yeah.
But they have another trope in there, which is very like from TVs and movies.
Oh boy.
And I'm just like, it's the very end. It's the very end. So anyone who's listening, it's the very end and you will know exactly what I'm talking about. And on the one hand, it's like, yes, like it was full of emotion and it felt very off the game. But on the other hand, for fuck's sakes, like, but I do appreciate the fact that it was a very big game and it still had that love, that queerness in there. And it still had those options. And I think that was important for a lot of people. And I think it has a lot of very interesting conversations. Like Life is Strange 2, when it came out, I feel like it was very important for the time it came out, because it was talking about the struggle of being an immigrant, specifically being an immigrant from Mexico, or being, because they weren't immigrants themselves, but their dad was, and they emigrated, and they were US citizens, but it was specifically talking about that experience, like Trump era, and not feeling like you belonged in the US and not feeling like people wanted you there, and talking about like building the wall, all of that stuff. So it has a lot of really important conversations in there. But yeah, I feel like there's a lot more that the gaming industry needs to be doing. I honestly feel like the industry is very behind. And I think a lot of that is because of the way they're still trying to appeal to this sort of core gamer demographic, quote unquote, of cis white men. And so scared to branch out from that. And anytime they do, there's just massive backlash because the quote unquote gamers with a capital G are saying you're taking another thing from us. You see how much they cry when you take Star Wars and James Bond and Marvel from them. And so he's like, you're taking gaming from us, and you've got this woman who, why does she have beard fuzz? I'm talking about Horizon, if that wasn't obvious.
Don't even get me
Why
started.
does she have beard fuzz? And it's like, have you met a woman? Have you seen a woman with your eyes?
Only from a distance, I think.
Not close enough to see the beard fuzz.
Yeah. It's a testament to how far our graphic capacity has come.
Right. There's just so much to say about the fan base and the way the fan base has such I would say a very vocal minority, but they're very, very vocal, and it's so disgustingly toxic that it really drags the industry down. But I feel like that culture is not just outside, but inside. Like, who is behind the games that are being made? Who are the people in that boardroom, in that game dev bank? Like, who's working there? Who's writing the narrative? And I feel like that's the problem as well. I mean, we've all seen what's happening with Activision Blizzard at the moment. That is not an isolated case. No. The gaming industry is toxic through and through, inside and out. And I think that is what is holding the industry back.
Yeah, it's a shame that, as you said, this vocal minority has this scarcity mindset that making room for others inherently takes something from them, and it's unfortunate that they feel that way, but they're also wrong, and they should feel wrong. Vaneet, it's been absolutely lovely to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us. Where can folks follow you online? And is your book out yet? / where can folks find it? Or when is it coming out?
So in terms of socials, you can find me literally everywhere at Nintendo Mad 888. Honestly, you can Google that and my social medias will come up. Twitter is where I'm most active. You can also follow me on Instagram. I have a Medium, which again is Nintendo Mad 888 at medium.com. I haven't put anything there in a while because I've been writing a book, as we mentioned. And in terms of the book, it's I've only submitted my first draft, and I'm currently just finishing up my edits. So hopefully final draft / second draft soon. The current timeline is potentially very, very late this year, very, very early next year. So I think sometime between December and February. And if you follow me, I will definitely be putting up information as and when I have it. So once it's available for pre-order, I will be posting it everywhere and be like, please go buy the book that I spent 2 years writing, because like, you got to make it all worth it, because please. It was a lot of work and I'm tired.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Vaneet, for joining us on Pixel Therapy.
Thank you for having me.
Time is up for today's session of Pixel Therapy. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope that listening to our thoughts and feelings gave you some thoughts and feelings of your own. If you want more Pixel Therapy, come check us out at patreon.com/pixeltherapypod, where you can snag that monthly bonus episode for just $2 a month, plus opportunities to get involved with the community and influence the show directly. If you're not up for contributing monetarily, but you enjoyed this episode, you can show your support for free by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts and following us on Twitter and Instagram at Pixel Therapy Pod. That stuff is just as important, and we appreciate it just as much. Remember that Pixel Therapy is a happy member of the But Why Though podcast network, so you can support us by supporting them and heading over to butwhythoughpodcast.com. That's though with a THO. Take a peek at the inclusive geek community they're building around pop culture news, reviews, and kick-ass podcasts like yours truly. And you can keep up with all of this stuff and more by visiting our website at pixeltherapypod.com.
Finally, since we like to put our money and our energy where our mouth is, we end every episode with a recommended side quest. The IGL Foundation is a New Orleans-based nonprofit organization whose mission is to bring people together to learn, compete, and play by providing opportunities for students in the areas of technology, gaming, and the digital arts that are both enriching and entertaining. While using the portal of alternate dimensional experiences, they use gaming as a gateway to building networks and communities, through social competitions and mental athletic training to build bonds with students. To learn more, get involved, and donate, visit iglfoundation.org. Again, that's iglfoundation.org.
Thank you for that side quest, Spencer. That is our show for today. So go forth, run a story mission, level up some stats, and don't forget to hug an NPC every now and then. We'll be back soon with some more
Pixel
Therapy. Bye-bye.